Mayor Jacobs,
I am here.
Committeeman Hickey,
Here.
Mr. Walter.
Here.
Ms. Orabana.
Here.
Mr. Leonard.
Here.
Mr. Rodelius.
Here.
Mr. First.
Here.
Mr. Wild.
Here.
Mr. DiMartino.
Here.
Chairwoman Gotcha. Here. Adequate notice of this meeting of the Bedminster Township Land Use Board was filed with the Township Clerk, sent to the Bernardsville News and the Courier News and to all subscribers, and posted at the Township Municipal Building, 1 Miller Lane, Bedminster, New Jersey, on January 10th, 2025.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I'll open it up to the public. If you have anything that you'd like to discuss, it's not on the agenda. Anybody on the line there?
Yes, we have a Jess Berger who's online, and there is one person in the audience. So if you have anything you'd like to discuss that's not on the agenda, you can either unmute yourself or raise your hand or come up to the mic. Yes, there's also some in the back of the room.
Okay, anyone online on Zoom? Guess not. So we'll close it to the public. We have minutes that we need to approve from May. If you've had a chance to look at those, we need an.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Is anybody, I'm abstaining. Abstaining?
And Steve abstained. Yes.
Okay. Okay, minutes are approved. We're having the 2005 housing element and fair share plan. I guess we're getting started with that right away, or?
Yes, Madam Chairman, that's a public hearing. This is now the public hearing on the amendment to the master plan of the Planning Board, Land Use Board of the Township of Bedminster for 2025. And Mr. Banish will describe it and summarize it for you in the public. Then we'll open to the public for comment and questions. And then hopefully you will adopt the housing element fair share plan and proceed on to the governing body committee for their endorsement. Both will be filed within 48 hours of their adoption by Mr. Bilardo, and they will allow the township to continue its immunity from builder's remedy lawsuits, which is a very good thing. So without much further, I'll just confirm that, Frank, you understand you're still under oath from prior testimony in this board. Is that correct?
I do.
Thank you, Mr. Banish. Please, the board recognizes and accepts the qualification of Frank Banish as a professional planner. And please go ahead, Frank.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Thank you. The board has had an opportunity to discuss this before. This is a public hearing, so we will talk about the entirety of what the plan calls for. But let me just say a couple of things as a starter. The document is somewhat massive compared to, the typical memo you might get from us. And so it's like any elephant, something we want to be able to eat in some bites. And the bites on this one are basically, there is a substantial body of information about the demographic and housing conditions in town. That's a requirement to be included in the housing element, and that is most of the first 18 pages. So other than an introduction and some language about what it is, what we're here to do in the beginning of the document, the guts of what we're here to approve tonight, certainly the whole document, but the fair share plan portion, and that starts on page 18. So we're going to talk about, to the extent that I'm not going to make a presentation of all those demographic and housing data for the purposes of this discussion, or may remember that we provided that to you previously before this document was produced. So I'm assuming that I don't need to talk about that. If you don't think that's the case, I'm happy to proceed differently. I think everybody's here to find out what it is Bedminster is going to do to meet their fair share.
Right.
And I'm happy to tell you, mostly you already did it, and you already did most of it a long time ago. So what this fair share plan has to do according to law, as the Fair Housing Act was amended, is it has to basically give a complete accounting for your obligation since 1987 and up through 2035, 10 years from now. What were you supposed to do and what did you actually do? So how many units did you owe? How many of them needed to be rentals or family rentals? How many could be senior units? There are a variety of criteria that the units also need to qualify under besides the gross number of units that constitute your obligation. Because of the fact that the settlement that was resolved with the Hills PUD and planned residential development produced so many more units than you were ultimately assigned for the first portion of the COA allocation. You were assigned 819 affordable units in the court settlement, or yeah, it's a settlement. And when the Council on Affordable Housing calculated your obligation, it was 154 units. And so if you had to build 5 units for every affordable unit, you certainly didn't have to build 5,000 or 4,000 units total to get what you owed. So what I'm saying is you did an awful lot of paying in advance, and we're taking credit for a lot of that paying in advance of this plan. And the way the plan lays itself out, it outlines what the fair share obligation is for each round. And so when we talk about the words prior round, I won't go too deep into this, but when COA was first formed under the Fair Housing Act, they were assigned the job of coming up with housing obligations and then administering a process without the court that would let a town come in, show them their housing plan, say we're doing what we're supposed to do, and COA could say, you're right. And they always used to say COA is your friend, and people would laugh about that, but compared to what we've been through, COA probably was your friend. Nonetheless, your first round, those first 2 rounds, which amounted to 12 years, was 154 units, like I said a minute ago. They initially thought that each round was going to be 6 years. So this far away from 1987 we would have been pretty further down the road than the 4th round that we're going into now. And what happened was 1987 to 1999 were sort of consolidated for purposes of these discussions as the prior rounds. The 3rd round was the one we dealt with when we had our settlement with Fair Share after the last Mount Laurel Ford decision, and you've been compliant, and that was all taken care of quite a while ago. You now had a 3rd round prospective need obligation of 225 units. We demonstrated previously that you met that, and we'll show how you did again. In round 4, you had a 72 unit obligation. Now, round 3 was 1999 to 2025. It was a 25-year, effectively, period. And what most towns got hit with that you didn't get hit with were very substantial obligations where they were told, here's your 25-year obligation, but instead of us letting you start to make that payment first year, we're going to tell you when it's almost the last year that you owe the whole thing before the deadline, which is what happened in an awful lot of towns that are still watching thousands of inclusionary unit and developments that haven't even come online yet getting built from the 3rd round. So in one respect, the fact that the Hills overdid it when it did, it put a lot of housing in a good place, made a lot of great neighbors. I don't think anybody complains anymore about the fact that the Hills here, in fact, enough of you have lived there or still live there, so to speak, that it's not anything that we think of as a negative, but certainly you paid a lot more than your dues up front. I guess that's really what I'm trying to say. So as we go through these numbers, I demonstrate how you had the first round up, the prior round obligation, and you met it. And that's the table 2, I believe. Yeah. And that shows that 694 affordable units were the product of Timberbrook, the neighborhoods at the Hills, and Pluckerman Park. So in that period before 1999, you had done 694 units when you owed 154. In the allocation for the 3rd round, you had enough credits left over from the extra units that you did before that we were able to apply those credits. And I hesitated or failed to mention 269 of the units at the Hills that were deed restricted for affordability when they were built have again been deed restricted for another 30-year period voluntarily by owners who now get the benefit of paying lower taxes, and the unit stays affordable, has to be marketed through the affordability criteria, but nonetheless, that affordability has remained instead of disappearing as the deed restriction would expire in 30 years and be gone. So you also got credit for those 269 units. And I don't think I need to read you through the list one by one of these credits on table 3 that end up at 934. But if you look at the number we're shooting for, and you look at how much we're overshooting the number, here we had to only apply 225 units to the third round because that was what we owed. So the 934, after we took the 225 out, ended up, I don't know why it says 702 because there's something slightly wrong there, but we got more than 700 extra credit units going into round 4. Now we have to demonstrate in part how we met those other criteria. So if you look at table 4, there's a requirement for minimum amount of family units. And we've identified what those numbers are and what we've met them with. And you've been able to meet those micro criteria that are limits on bonus credits, limits on age restricted units. So these numbers all comply, and you fully satisfied the third round. That takes us up to how do we meet the 4th round obligation? And that's really, since the rest of this was pretty much already baked and done. And I have to say, when I say baked and done, you had the right to take credit for the approval that you granted in Pluckerman. We know, because we've been advised, that development is going to come back in a different form, and it's going to give us some more affordable units than we thought we were getting before, or more. So that's been factored into this plan, but we also had to take a debit to get the credit, right? Because we didn't get it before, so I couldn't give us credit for it in the third round. But in the third round plan, we were allowed to take credit for it because we were going to do it. And all we actually had to do to get credit for it was to zone for it. We didn't even have to come up with an approval or anything like that, or even a development. Present need obligation is 6 units. Present need is basically how many units in town are occupied by lower moderate income households that are in need of some repair because one of the major building systems are not functioning properly. Full complete kitchen, working sanitary facilities, exterior envelope of the building that's secure and complete, and roof and windows and all those kind. So typically, the way towns prove that they actually are not 6 of those units in town is the building inspector drives around. He already knows most of the town, but he drives around town, looks around for the places that he thinks might qualify. But it's not an easy fit, because then somehow you have to figure out, are those people also low and moderate income, or are they just not really interested in fixing it? And there's some of both sometimes. So I don't see a reason for you to worry about that, because you have so many extra credits that you're always allowed to use some of the extra credit to do the present need obligation. So it really gets us down to those 72 units. And when we start to do the accounting for that, on table 5, we end up being able to show that there are 812 available credit units, 683 of which are sales and 78 of which are rental. We did not get full credit for the rentals that we had. We had 102 rentals at Parkside and Cortland that had the restriction and were rentals through the restricted period, and then they came off restriction. When we did the plan last time, Fair Share was insisting that we do a family rental portion of what we owed last time, like we owe again this time. And they didn't give us any credit for the fact that we had extra family rental units from all the ones we did before. So in this plan, I've taken credit for those that still had deed restrictions in place when we took credit. We could have taken credit for them in the third round, and they're in the third round, and I've advanced other things into the 4th round. So the way we're essentially, the only thing we need to do to satisfy the obligation is the reformatted version of, what was the name of the Pluckerman development? The KRE development. I don't know if they ever had a name, right? But this was the mixed use project that had the apartments, and when we learned that the structured parking became too expensive, we got a haircut on the total number of units, but the law requires them to increase to 20% the number of affordable units. So we're going to get 140 total units, 28 of which will be affordable units. Then the identities of the crediting that are shown for table 4 are further identified on page 22, where 18 Pluckerman Park units are being credited, the 5 bonus credits from elite, because in the third round, there are bonus credits that were applicable to a family rental unit up to a certain, or a rental unit up to a certain percentage, 25% of your total units. We haven't fully used up all the age restricted units, or those bonus credits we couldn't get right now if we built the elite units in the 4th round, but because they were done in the 3rd round and occupied, the 5 bonus credits got carried into the 4th round. So that's part of how we're meeting our 78 number. KRE, I mentioned a minute ago, we have the 28 family rentals, and there's a substantial compliance credit for having done such a good job in the past that we didn't finish using up the credit on before, so that's also applied here. So as I say, what has already occurred and all the construction that's taken place, plus what KRE will build in Pluckerman, fully satisfies the obligations that you have under the 4th round. And once you get a judgment of compliance and repose, means no one can come after the township for a builder's remedy lawsuit until July 1st, 2035. When I hope to still be your plant. No, just thank you for all this time. I really have enjoyed it. It's been fun.
Does Carrie have to start construction on that property within a certain?
They've reformatted it before they ever got that far into it because they knew they couldn't pencil it out.
Okay, so they.
And we were lucky that instead of just going on to something they had much better figured out, that they came back to this one right away, because they've got it based on the 3rd round stuff. They've got inventory around the state that they can still build in jobs that are more shovel ready, so to speak. So yeah, they had a complete perfected site plan approval. Could have gotten building permits based on that approval, but didn't because of this other situation.
But
So
our application is based on our zoning for the complex, not their construction.
And it makes a really good point. We put them in the plan for 28 units. As long as our zoning requires and allows them to build what we say and we get the 28 units, they don't ever have to approve it in the 4th round. You don't even have to approve the development. You have to zone for it dissolved. But we know they want to do it. We want them to do it. So, you know, I'm not playing games here. I don't mean to make it sound like that. We're not shuffling. There's no shuffling the deck here. The deck got played against you a long time ago. We're just trying to get, a better hand at it.
Board, anybody questions for Frank?
I have a question. Frank, last meeting, we talked for a few minutes about group homes. Did we satisfy that requirement?
We don't have an obligation for group homes, Lou. If we had them, we would get extra credit. We tried to pursue whether or not the one home in town for the retired pastors that we knew functioned as a group home was eligible, and it was not, which is because it's not available, doesn't qualify the way that they credit this thing. But we're at a point where we still have 700 or 800 extra credits, so it's not something where we, to the extent if we had them, we would take credit for them, but we don't.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks for asking.
Mhm.
Can't tell I'm looking at him at all, can he? I thought I was looking right in his face.
Anybody else? I'll open it up to the public. Anybody online?
There's one woman online, Jess Berger, so if you are interested in stating something, you can either unmute yourself or raise your hand and let us know. If you're interested in the audience, you can just come up to the dais and give your comments.
Michelle Hoffman.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Michelle Hoffman.
Okay.
So I have a question, but this is probably not the forum for it, but you can tell me when there is. So since Bedminster has met their requirement as far as the number of housing units they have to have and therefore affordable housing units, my question always goes back to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund account that just sits there, and I want to know what forum I can discuss that in.
Here, Frank?
Well, it's not here. Land use.
Right, exactly. So that's why I'm asking what
Township
forum.
Committee,
Okay,
and Frank, you or
Part of the, let me,
David is working on.
yeah, part of this process will involve amending the spending plan that guides what the trust fund can be used for.
okay.
So before the court ultimately approves the plan that we're going to be submitting to the court as a result of this hearing, they will come back to us and talk about how we're going to spend that money. And we won't get a settlement with the Fair Share Housing Center unless we've developed a spending plan that appropriately allocates those trust fund dollars according to the categories that the law requires and, practical purposes that make sense. Is there a specific interest that you?
What's the timeline? Because the last spending plan was 2018. So we're
So should be
7
approved.
years out. So just wondering how frequently are the spending plans supposed to be done?
They don't, there isn't a regular frequency like that. Is
Okay.
there a specific spending interest that you have that you want to talk about?
Well, I can remember in the past, I serve on a condo board and I have for 10 years. So in the past, there were issues with regards to capital improvements. And at this point, COA had come down on the BHHC because they were sitting on well over $1 million and made them give out some grants for some capital improvement project. I've been asking about that for years. And I know that the account sits in excess of $2.8 million, but it doesn't seem that any funding is going back to help the communities that have affordable housing units. Now, I will tell you, my community is not 100% affordable. A lot of those units went market. I believe we have like 60 units that are still affordable, but we had asked for help with capital improvement projects like roofing. And we just replaced stair landings, we're replacing stairs, we have to do parking lots. Now, granted, we have, maintenance fees to pay for all of that, but since 60 units qualify as affordable housing and they are being used in the quota to meet fair share housing requirements, then shouldn't we be entitled to a portion of the projects based upon those 60 units?
The subsidy that applies to affordable housing can occur a number of different ways.
Mhm.
And there are certainly times where trust funds help in situations like the one you're
Okay.
describing. One of the biggest issues is that it can only sort of touched on it when you said some of the units went out of restriction
Mhm.
because the money can't be spent on anybody that doesn't qualify. So
Mhm.
I think the last time this came up, because I remember hearing about it before, that was a sticking point, I thought, and maybe I'm misremembering.
So
Correct me if
I've been told by 4 different people, members of township committee, town clerk, that in order to get any funding, all of the units that are deemed still affordable in our community would have to be financially requalified. And that would be at the cost of those individuals. So we would have to hire a third-party company to requalify everyone. Which doesn't quite seem fair if they're allowed to be counting those units as part of the fair share requirement.
they get counted one time because they were built.
Mhm.
And then when they come off restriction, unless we extend the restriction, they don't count again. So
Mhm.
we're not counting them in a way we're not entitled to because they were built when they
Okay.
exist. So that's sort of why they're counted.
Okay,
The other part of what you're asking about, I think, is a little more complicated. I don't think the planning board is really the forum.
no, and that's why I'm asking.
But I don't.
for it. But I wanted to find out
I think it's an
tonight.
important question.
Yeah, I wanted to find out tonight to make sure that we met our fair share requirement, so that at that point now I know that I can't be told again, oh, we're saving that money to build new units, because that's what I was told by Mayor Jacobs back in 2021. So, that being said, I'm still looking for information on how we can acquire some of those funds to help with our capital improvement project.
I think it's only fair to say that we fully anticipated needing those monies to meet this obligation.
Okay.
Didn't know that we were gonna end up in this situation
Okay.
till we got here, so I think it's.
Well, that's awesome. So then now there is no obligation. So now there's in excess of $2.8 million. And I would like to see that go back into the communities. As I've mentioned to many people before, in many of my many emails, saying that if the funds were going back into the community, maybe people wouldn't be so adverse to paying the recapture fees. Because that money is just sitting there. So that's my point. So I can definitely come back to a township committee meeting if we can put it on the agenda. I would love to talk about it and find out. I don't think the process of make everyone requalify at their own cost when they're already living in an affordable housing unit is fair. I'm trying to do what's fair for the community. So that's my goal.
Oh, I think we all
Yeah.
are, honestly.
Yeah, but I can tell you that I have been battling this since 2022. And I just get spun around in circles and no one will give me a direct answer. One other question I do have, and I don't know if somebody, maybe you know, because no one else can seem to give me an answer. Once COA was no longer overseeing a lot of the affordable housing, who took on that role of overseeing how those funds are being spent? Because I was directed to DCA, reached out to them, and they told me to go Fair Share Housing. Fair Share Housing doesn't respond to me. I've left numerous messages, sent emails. I finally got someone to take my call and she's like, oh, email me, and still nothing. No one will give me any of that information. So do you know who I can contact?
Fair Share Housing Center were the people that
Mhm.
approved the compliance plan that Bedminster submitted with the last spending plan that was
Okay.
approved, so.
But again, that spending plan is 7 years old.
Sure. And they're.
And there was only $1 million back then. Now there's almost 3. So,
Right, and part of the process of going through the court and getting the compliance judgment for our plan
Mhm.
involves presenting the court with with a spending plan that Fair Share Housing Center will have heard,
okay,
or else they'll give us a hard time.
okay. So Fair Share Housing is the organization that does oversee the spending.
And I think if you were to ask them, what are the complications of your group with your mixed income status, trying to do what you're trying to do, they probably could tell you quicker than I can.
I can't get anybody to answer. I've emailed, I've called. I mean, if you can connect me with someone, I leave voicemail messages. Nobody ever calls me back. So it has been a battle for 2 years. And I just need somebody who can,
Ma'am,
yeah,
ma'am, I'm the board attorney, and
okay,
I think you're sort of misunderstanding the process of how this works, and Frank is helping
Okay.
you, but Fair Share Housing Center is a nonprofit entity. It does not act as a
Mhm.
governmental entity, and it did not replace COA. COA was eliminated by a statute called A4, and certain aspects of it are basically allocated or just to an alternative dispute resolution program
okay,
that the township is participating in. So really, it is probably the courts that determine whether a spending plan amendment is acceptable or not. But first, all discretion on that subject rests with the township committee of every township, or the governing body of every township, including the township committee of Bedminster Township. So
they keep telling me that everybody has to financially qualify. And we
there
have
is there,
company to do that.
and that is that I don't know the detail of that, and I'm not trying to help. I can't answer that question right now, but I don't think it's as simple as saying who is in charge of it, because Fair Share Housing Center is just a party in interest in the alternative dispute resolution program. They're not even actually opposing the township's declaratory judgment. So it's just much more complicated than you are arguing. And
Well, I'm just, bear with me.
I think these are future, I think these are all future discussions that you can continue at the township committee about the spending plan, but
Okay.
they are not like, there's no there's no clear authority, entity, governmental entity for review and approval other than arguably the alternative dispute resolution program, the courts. Okay, it's basically a replacement of the declaratory judgment process of round 3. So it's very complex what I just described. And it just is not really germane to this housing plan.
No, and I get that. And like I said, I just came because I wanted to make sure that we've met the requirements, because then I will, at that point, we know that we're not spending money on new
No,
construction.
we might end up, the committee has the discretion to decide how to spend the monies in a housing trust fund. And that is very broad discretion. In fact, if you've seen the plan from 2018, I think it was updated in 2023, but basically you see there are categories of expenditure that are possible in a spending plan, percentages, allocations, and they are all it can be changed over time. And the key is that it can only be spent in accordance with the rules, strangely enough, of a no longer existing entity, the Council on Affordable Housing, and perhaps court review of whether a change in a spending plan can take place. So it's all very complex. I don't think it's germane to this particular hearing tonight, but and I'm just trying to help you know that it's not like you have an
Just want to get pushed in the right
entitlement to
direction.
money from a housing trust fund.
Well, I assume that
Okay.
those funds, that $2.8+ million would go back into affordable housing, since all of those funds did come from recapture fees from affordable housing units. So I would assume that it would stay within that program, correct?
No, it stays, not necessarily the way you're describing it. And there are funds in the Housing Trust Fund that come from other sources besides the recapture program. That being said, I think what you're getting at is, can it be spent on certain things? It can be, but the discretion to spend it rests with the Township Committee, not the Land Use Board.
Okay, and again, like I said, I just needed a starting point because I've gotten nowhere in my efforts over the past 3 years, so. I appreciate it. I will be back the next time.
Thank you. Anyone else, Janine?
Anyone else? There is one person online. If you have anything that you'd like to say, you can unmute yourself. Again, raise your hand or just start to speak.
No. All right, I'll close it to the public.
So, Madam Chairman, if the board is ready, you have before you a short resolution, which would be effective tonight. If someone moves it and seconds it and it is voted in favor of, it will adopt tonight the Housing Element Fair Share Plan of 2025 as prepared by Frank Banish. It will then become part of the Township Land Use Board Master Plan. It will then also be referred over to the Township Committee and John Bellardo for e-filing within 48 hours of tonight, and to the Township Committee for endorsement, I believe at its next meeting. And after its endorsement by a resolution of endorsement, that becomes the Fair Share Plan of the township itself. And it then gets recorded within e-filed with the court program within 48 hours of that. And all of this is great because you are accomplishing it before June 30th, 2025, the deadline for immunity under the statute A4. So if there's someone who would move that resolution, we can move on. It'd be great.
So moved.
Second.
Roll
And a
call.
roll call, Ginny.
Mayor Jacobs?
Aye.
Committeeman Hickey?
Aye.
Mr. Walter?
Aye.
Ms. Orabana?
Aye.
Mr. Leonard?
Aye.
Mr. Rodriguez?
Aye.
Mr. DeGiovanni?
Aye.
Mr. First?
Aye.
Mr. Wild?
Aye.
Mr. DiMartino?
Aye.
Chairwoman Gotcha?
Aye. Resolution is approved. We have another resolution for AT&T. Need a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve. Second.
Mayor Jacobs, Committeeman Hickey.
Wait, this is AT&T.
Yes, you
Okay,
were
okay.
recused.
Yeah,
Sorry.
you're accused.
Mr.
Right, that was,
Walter?
I was, I
Yeah.
think it was Board of Adjustment, it was
Yeah.
Planning Board, sorry.
Yeah, you.
But I'm
Where
recused, I
you-
cannot,
You
yeah,
cannot.
thank you.
So it was Mayor Jacobs, aye. Mr. Walter,
Aye.
Mr. Arbani were not here.
Yeah.
Mr. Leonard,
Aye.
Mr. Delius, you were recused. Mr. DeGiovanni,
Aye.
Mr. First, you were not here. Mr. Wild,
Aye.
Mr. DiMartino.
Aye.
Chairwoman Gutschall.
Aye. Resolution is approved.
That's right. Be away, of course.
Yes.
And we already did the amendment to the master plan. We did that resolution.
Yes, we did.
Okay. Since Paul isn't here, are you gonna speak up for Paul?
I would love to pretend to be Paul.
Okay.
Hold on. No. So we have two determinations of completeness. Both Tiger Claw and Varnish were deemed incomplete earlier this year. They both resubmitted their information, and now Paul has given us letters, which you guys have in your packets, where there are some waivers, but he do believes that they are able to be complete and to be heard. Both of them, however, requested August 7th. Nobody seems to want July. So I don't think it's a problem. I asked Paul if he thought we would be able to hear both. We'll probably hear Varnish because it is a homeowner first, and then Tiger Claw, which is the gas station. So I do believe, though, Tom, we have to have them vote for a determination of completeness. Is that correct?
That is correct. I will help the board with that motion. So it is a motion by the board to waive the remaining items for completeness for the Tiger Paw application first, and to deem the application complete. Is there such a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
And a roll call.
Let's see. Tiger Claw was not you young men. Mr. Walter?
Aye.
Mr. Arbana?
Aye.
Mr. Leonard?
Aye.
Mr. Rodelius?
Aye.
Mr. DeGiovanni?
Aye.
Mr. First?
Aye.
Mr. Wild?
Aye.
Mr. DiMartino?
Aye.
Chairwoman Gutschall.
Aye.
Okay, and now on the Varnish application, it is a motion to waive the remaining items for completeness and to deem the application complete. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Walter?
Aye.
Mr. Arbana?
Aye.
Mr. Leonard?
Aye.
Mr. Rodelius?
Aye.
Mr. DeGiovanni?
Aye.
Mr. First?
Aye.
Mr. Wild?
Aye.
Mr. DiMartino?
Aye.
Chairwoman Gutschall.
Aye. Those applications are ready to go to our August meeting. We have date.
Six.
Oh, yeah, August 7th. August 2nd. Okay. I don't see anything else on the agenda. Any board members have anything they'd like to discuss?
I'll just mention that we had a meeting with property owners and business owners in Bedminster Village, Main Street corridor. Similar to the meetings we've had down in Pluckman regarding the vitality of the commercial market down there, the retail office space. Right, that issue involved I attended on the town. We had really a great turnout from the businesses in Bedminster Village, and getting ideas and what it's working, what's not working. Parking, always an issue. Issue came up about signs and what are we doing on signage, particularly in historic district, and just about that entire corridor is in historic district. And honestly, the next round of meetings we have may also extend the same invite to folks in Park Hills, along with Mayor Welsh, so we can talk about not just the corridor that ends at Bridge, but a corridor that extends into Park Hills as one Bedminster Park Hills business district. It's getting relative and some local ideas. And Frank, you know, what do you need Colin is to start some meeting and steps.
Probably the most important thing to talk about, back up. We have similar ambitions for Bedminster and Pluckerman, but they have differing abilities to deliver. We'd like really nice, walkable, engaging streetscapes, lots of restaurants, retail, blah, blah, blah. And what we came to the conclusion today was we also like the financial services and other offices that are paying the rent and keep it Main Street looking pretty nice and nice looking signs in front of the properties. And it's not gonna, and we don't want to divest those people so that we could put in retail. And obviously at a time where the footprint of retail is sort of shrinking, particularly in this scale of retail, you gotta wonder, you know, we would watch a series of faces change like we've seen up in the places here in town before. So it was really, there was a great sentiment about working together. I think that was really encouraging. The pastor obviously is a very magnetic personality who really gets people going and inspired some kind of a conversation that I think was the start of something that really, you know, Larry and Colin have led this effort twice now. And in Bedminster Village, we are still finding out what the results will be, but I think it's really positive. And I think what we're gonna find in Bedminster is that they're gonna have complaints like we always hear about signs. This time around, we probably really need to figure out the answer, make some changes. The issue with signs is always, it always drives me nuts when I go to one of these towns where the shopping center was only allowed to have signs that had all the exact same letters with the same color scheme. Because branding, signs are there to help you for a couple of reasons, right? The guy wants you to know he's there, but for wayfinding purposes, you want to know he's there. So when you pull over, you saw it, you know, you've never been here before, driving down the road, you know you're looking for a certain kind of place. The sign helps. But I think what we want to do without giving away the farm is be a little more sympathetic to the idea that some of our dimensionality, like an 8 square foot sign, 2x4, is going to be challenging, even at the speeds that we have traffic going by on Main Street. I think it was encouraging, for sure. I'm really glad to see it.
There's also some misunderstanding about what the zoning is, what towns, what the
Oh,
town
yeah.
has permitted in the past, and Paul noted that the board, the land use board, actually it's a planning board of adjustment, only reviews the plans that are submitted and requested. So, for example, for those who remember the Rilo application, which was the former Desiderios, or that was representative there. So, well, you know, repurposing that building is just too much. The building's falling apart. It should be demoed, and we were told we couldn't demo. And the question came up: did we ever request it to be demolished? No.
The mayor says misunderstanding, misinformation might be more like.
So, you know, there is a fair amount of that, perhaps if there's some result of that meeting. That I'm forgetting what you don't answer. And that was intention was to build and see the demolition construction.
It was nice that you were able to dismiss that misunderstanding in that setting where everybody heard the fact that he was claiming something that was just patently wrong and you straightened him out. That's good to have.
So, you know, we'll see. I mean, that would. But it was years ago. And once again, the building is not going to get better on its own forward, and sits there vacant. And so maybe now the information is back to the property owner, and we actually see something take place.
By the way, just to add on to what Frank and Heather said, Grace Fellowship Church has become a hub of activity. It is an amazing building that they've renovated. It is attracting services on Sunday, but they've got a whole bunch of other things going on. They're actually Little Pickle's biggest bagel quest. So they feed 200 bagels to people just on Sunday alone. But it started to talk around what can we do to attract foot traffic. Maybe it's a street fair, or maybe it's partnering together with some of the other businesses to do something special to bring people down there. So, and they all heard that, and they were all kind of starting to jog people's memories in terms of what could be done there, what's possible. Because again, people are attracted to that type. Christians say gets on a weekend 500.
500 in person, and then
A couple hundred on video. So
Far
they,
flung too.
Yeah.
right, from all
Not all
across
the
the
way
country
around California. They're
and
close.
across the world, yeah. So they've really built something from, as you recall, that was a failing building, and that parish was going nowhere until he took it over. So something to think about in terms of, using that as a magnet for attraction of other businesses, other uses, whatever.
And it was interesting because we did have representative from Design Appliances. We had the owners of Trattoria Mediterraneo there as well. And each of them had some parking issues. So a lot of the discussion came back to parking, zoning requirements, and standards, or setbacks not reached. And so there are some takeaways for us to consider in looking at village areas, just so we continue talking. And we will, need to take a look at the village neighborhood zone, the Bedminster village. Businesses there to thrive, and some of them are, are doing okay, and others, some of those properties need a little help.
Newsflash, Katz's Pharmacy's coming back.
And ice cream.
And ice cream.
Good.
Advanced, are they moving forward? I know they're doing, fresh pet.
Yeah.
That almost,
So Fresh Pet,
Yeah.
the expectation is that Fresh Pet may be doing, they may be opening for business. The thought was June, so maybe they do finish in June, or perhaps more likely in July. I know they needed a utility permit for PSEG. I think that was issued last week. So they should have gas service installed building, and
They have sidewalk issues?
they have a sidewalk issue that's associated with DOT. And that's probably more germane to the rest of the project. DOT is asking for a sidewalk to run along Route 206. What the board approved, what this board approved, was a sidewalk that comes down off the intersection by the Whitecoat property and by the intersection of Lamington and 206. And then it passes the Fresh Pet building, heading south. Comes in towards the project by maybe about 15-20 yards, runs along the parking lot, and then it comes back up by the entrance. That is what the planning board approved. That's what we all wanted. DOT wants a sidewalk immediately adjacent to the highway.
adjacent to what, I'm sorry?
The highway, 206.
Oh, the highway.
So that you can be walking, if anyone's gonna be walking,
Mhm.
if they're, other than walking down to George, I'm not really sure where you're going. There's, that property ends at that crazy split between 202 and 206. There's no pedestrian access, there's no biking access. Position from DOT that they have a policy that there should be pedestrian bike access highways. And we really would like that policy implemented.
They implemented it anywhere else along the highway? Big town?
No.
Actually, there, the cars are going left and right.
So, you know,
They would have-
I've had discussions with, Advance with their construction guys. I've had, discussions with Paul Ferrero. Paul's had discussions with them. I've gone back to a liaison at DOT and saying, Bedminster Planning Board disagrees and liked the proposal to bring the pedestrian and biking access closer to the buildings, the parking lot, rather than up along the highway, which we thought would be just visually unappealing and perhaps unsafe. So that will be continued discussions with DOT. But as to the phase 2 of the
Yeah,
project,
that's,
yeah, I think that this is one of the issues that needs to be resolved for the continued.
I see. Okay.
But the landscaping for Fresh Pet is in, I believe you're starting the landscaping for the properties on Somerville Road in those the back areas. So I think
They have the best
that work
commercial.
will go on soon.
They have the best commercial, the Sopranos.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
the Fresh Pet one?
Yeah.
That is so cool.
Yeah, Fresh Pet is very very anxious to get into the building. Once again, I think we're looking at just a few short weeks. But
You moved along quickly. Good. Very,
We just want more national headquarters. to come here.
anybody else?
Start.
Anything else? Anybody? No? So we have nothing further in July, Janine? That's it?
July 3rd, we had already said we were not having a meeting
Right.
because no one will probably be around. And at this very moment, no, it does not look like we will be having a July 10th meeting unless something else comes in. We don't have any applications that are ready except for these two. And I guess they were probably in the same position where their professionals were going to be away and didn't have people that would be here. So as of right now, we don't have anything in July. I will keep you posted maybe, in a week or two, but you probably have the month off.
I want to be
All right.
careful.
I know, I'm just.
Okay, no, need a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Hi,
Have a good summer.
Everybody, good night.
good night, everyone.
Night, thank you all.
Tom.
Good night.
Janine, mark me in.
Okay, yeah, you got it. I got you, Lou.
Okay, thanks.
Hey,
Thank you.
Janine and Frank, sign the resolution and the. And
Carol,
Frank,
Tom is
plan.
admonishing you to sign the resolution.
Thank you.
tonight,
You too.
And then Janine will.
Yes.